In 1983, 46% of American 16-year-olds held a driver's license. By the most recent count from the University of Michigan Transportation Research Institute, that number has fallen near 25%. That is not a dip. That is half a generation quietly declining to do something their parents treated as automatic. No press release, no protest, just a number sitting in a dataset that nobody wants to explain out loud. Every must be nice to have a car joke aimed at Gen Z carries the same buried assumption that the choice not to drive comes from laziness, or fear of the wheel, or too much time spent indoors. Comfortable explanations that don't require anyone to check a receipt. But the data doesn't point towards psychology. It points towards arithmetic, cold, specific, and getting worse every year this decade. So here is the actual question, stripped of judgment. This was never about confidence behind the wheel. It's about who can currently afford to sit in one. Not who wants to drive, who can clear the license fee, the car payment, the insurance premium, and still make rent. Reframe it that way, and Gen Z won't drive stops sounding like a personality trait and starts sounding like a balance sheet. Here's the first number insurers would rather you not connect out loud. Actuarially, a 17-year-old male driver is statistically riskier and therefore pricier to insure than a 45-year-old man with 2 prior DUI convictions on his record. Read that twice. The system isn't pricing recklessness. It's pricing age itself, and Gen Z is the age group holding the bill before they've made a single mistake. Second number. In 2023, the average price of a new car in America crossed $48,000. For most entry-level jobs available to someone under 25, that figure is not a car payment. It's an entire year's take-home pay, before rent, food, or a single insurance bill. The car itself now costs what a starting salary is supposed to cover for 12 months. Third number. By mid-2020, 52% of 18 to 29-year-olds in America were living with their parents, the highest rate recorded since the Great Depression census. 3 separate numbers: insurance pricing, car pricing, housing dependence. None of them mention laziness. All 3 point at the same closed door, and that door has a lock most people haven't priced yet. So let's set the actual stakes before going further. This is not an essay about Gen Z's work ethic, motivation, or supposed fear of responsibility. This is an audit, a plain accounting of every fee, tax, and price increase stacked between an average teenager and the seat of a car. Follow the money, not the stereotype, and the picture changes completely. To hold all this together, think of the driver's license as the first rung of a ladder. Every milestone that comes after, first job, first apartment, first real independence, quietly assumes you already climbed that first rung. Miss it, and you're not lazy. You're standing at the bottom of a ladder, staring at a rung that used to be there. Here's the twist the mockery always misses. That first rung didn't rot away on its own, and it didn't vanish overnight. It was sawed off. Deliberately, quietly, one budget cut and one price hike at a time, spread across 4 decades. Nobody held a press conference. They just kept cutting, and the ladder kept getting shorter at the bottom. So here's the map for what's ahead. 4 separate systems did the sawing: the license itself, the price of the car, the insurance billed to protect it, and the underlying economy holding all 3 up. Each one alone looks like a minor inconvenience. Stacked together in order, they explain the entire 21-point collapse in one chart. Start with System 1, the license itself. Before talking about what it costs now, it's worth seeing what it used to cost, because most people under 30 have no idea how differently this system was built the first time around, back when getting licensed wasn't a personal expense but a public assumption. In 1983, getting licensed at 16 wasn't a purchase. It was a civic ritual, baked directly into public school curriculum nationwide. Driver's education, classroom hours, and behind-the-wheel hours both was free, funded the same way English or algebra was funded. The state treated teaching you to drive as public infrastructure, not a private transaction between a family and a business. Then the cut. Through the oil crisis budget crunches of the late 1970s and into the 1980s, public school districts across the country quietly stripped behind-the-wheel driver's education out of their curriculums. first as a temporary savings measure, then permanently. Nobody voted on it directly. A free rung on the ladder simply became a private expense, district by district, and it never went back. Which brings us to today's price tag. Private driving schools now charge between $300 and $700 for the exact same hours public schools used to hand out for free. That's not inflation on a candy bar. That's a specific, formerly public service resold back to teenagers as a private product, and the first system just finished getting sawed off. By 2011, all 50 states had adopted some form of graduated driver licensing. Night driving curfews, limits on how many passengers a new driver can carry, 30 to 70 hours of supervised practice before the state lets you sit for a road test. Not a suggestion, a legal gate, state by state, closing in the same direction. The ladder didn't just get steeper, it got longer. Here's the part that doesn't get said out loud. The delay was the point. GDL didn't accidentally push licensure later. It was engineered to. Teen crash rates dropped double digits in state after state once these laws landed. The system traded speed for survival, and it worked exactly as intended. The trade-off was real. The framing of it as a personal failure, that part wasn't. Give the other side its due. In the early 1990s, teenagers had the highest per-mile crash death rate of any age group on record. Some states saw 16-year-old fatality rates north of 5 times the adult average. Lawmakers weren't inventing a problem to justify paperwork. They were responding to actual coffins. Treat GDL as bureaucratic cruelty and you miss what it was actually solving for. But here's where the steelman runs out of road. GDL alone explains a few months of delay, not a decade of decline. It added friction to a generation that was already getting priced out of insurance, priced out of vehicles, priced out of the wages that used to cover both. The law didn't cause the collapse. It arrived right as the floor was already giving way. Then came the bottleneck nobody voted for. COVID-era DMV closures didn't just pause service. They built a backlog that outlived the pandemic itself. In parts of the country, scheduling an actual road test meant a wait of several months. In the worst cases, over a year. You could do everything right, the hours, the curfew, the permit, and still be stuck behind a calendar the state couldn't clear. Add it up before a single car even enters the conversation. Stricter requirements, longer supervised hours, a road test scheduled a year out in some counties. The on-ramp to adulthood got narrower, slower, and more expensive, and that's wrong one. Nobody's bought a vehicle yet. Nobody's paid a cent of insurance. The floor was already tilted before the real costs even started. Wrong one was friction. Annoying, expensive in time, but survivable. Wrong two is where the math stops being annoying and starts being hostile. Because wrong two isn't about earning the right to drive. It's about actually owning the thing you're licensed to operate. And the price of that thing didn't just rise. It detached itself from what an entry-level income can plausibly absorb. Level 2, the vehicle, not the license, not the test, the object itself. A new car in America is no longer priced like a car. It's priced like a down payment on a house, financed over years against a paycheck that has not moved anywhere close to the same speed. This is where the ladder stops being about rules and starts being about raw math. Here's the number. In 2023, the average new car in the US sold for over $48,000. Kelley Blue Book and Cox Automotive both confirm it. In 2010, that average sat under $29,000. That's not inflation keeping pace with wages. That's the price more than doubling while entry-level pay crawled forward at a fraction of the speed. The used market was supposed to be the escape hatch. It wasn't. Between 2021 and 2022, used car prices spiked 35 to 40%. The Mannheim Used Vehicle Value Index recorded its sharpest run-up on record. The cheap starter car, the beat-up first vehicle every prior generation could count on, simply stopped being cheap. The exit ramp closed right as the entrance did too. Put a number on it. During the pandemic shortage, dealers were quoting a 2004 Honda Civic. 200,000 miles on the odometer, no warranty, nothing special, at close to $10,000. That's not a typo, and it wasn't a joke, even though it became one online. A car built when its buyer was in diapers, priced like a down payment on a decent apartment, so buyers stretched the loan instead. Experience 2024 data puts the average new auto loan term at 68 to 72 months, nearly 6 years of payments, with an average monthly bill near $735. That's not a car payment anymore. That's a mortgage in miniature, minus the asset that appreciates. The car depreciates the entire time you're still paying for it. Now put the loan next to the paycheck. Entry-level wages for workers in their 20s have not kept pace with vehicle price inflation since 2019. Not close. The ratio of income to car cost hasn't crept up. It has quietly doubled. Nobody announced this. There was no headline event, no single villain. Just a slow-motion widening between what a car costs and what a first job pays. So level 2 closes on this. There is no more bottom. The beater used to be the safety valve. Ugly, cheap, reliable enough to get you to a shift. That valve is gone. The floor of the car market rose faster than the floor of any entry-level paycheck, and the two lines never met back up. Rung 2 isn't hard to climb. It's priced out of reach. A teenager can clear rung 1 and rung 2 anyway. Driver said paid. The car somehow financed. That doesn't mean the ladder gets easier. Level 3 is the bill nobody warns you about before you sign anything. The one that shows up monthly, indefinitely, tied to nothing you did. It isn't a test you pass once. It's insurance, and it never stops being due. Level 3, insurance. The invisible tax nobody puts in a brochure, priced not on how you drive but on the year you were born. Two 18-year-olds, identical grades, identical clean records, get charged wildly different rates depending on birth month and zip code. This isn't personal, it's actuarial. And it's the first cost on this ladder that has nothing to do with effort at all. The logic behind it is cold, not cruel. Insurers price by risk pool, and drivers aged 16 to 19 crash at multiples of the adult rate. Some datasets show 3 to 4 times the collision frequency of drivers over 25. The industry isn't guessing, and it isn't punishing you personally. It's running the numbers on millions of claims and putting your age exactly where the data says it belongs. Here's the real dollar figure. Adding a teen driver to a family policy can raise the total premium 100 to 200%, often $300 to $500 a month by itself, according to insurance.com and Bankrate data. That's not a one-time fee, that's a second car payment, recurring every month before a single mile gets driven for any actual reason. Check the math yourself and it holds. Even at 18, with a spotless record and a completed driver's ed course, a solo policy commonly runs $350 to $400 a month, not because of anything that happened, because of a birth date on a form. Insurers aren't pricing the driver in front of them, they're pricing the birthday, and the birthday doesn't negotiate. Which explains the dependency loop underneath all of it. Most drivers under 18 only exist on the road at all because a parent is quietly absorbing that premium somewhere else in the household budget. Remove that parent, remove that absorption, and the license stops being a real capability. It becomes theoretical. A piece of plastic proving you passed a test you can't actually afford to use. For a stretched household, just add them to the policy isn't a small ask. It's a second rent payment landing on a family that may already be one bad month from missing the first one. There's no flexible tier, no discount for households already at their limit. The invoice arrives the same size regardless of what else is due that month. Close out level 3. Insurance is the toll booth hidden behind the toll booth. You pass the driving test. You buy or borrow the car, and you still get stopped here every single month, indefinitely, by a cost that was never mentioned in driver's ed and never shows up in the sticker price. 3 rungs cleared. The ladder isn't done charging you yet. Zoom out and stack all 3 levels: driver's ed and licensing fees, inflated car prices, and insurance priced purely by age. Add them together and price out what growing up costs now versus 1995. Adjusted for nothing, just the raw numbers side by side. The gap isn't a feeling, it's a specific, calculable, and much larger number than the generation before was ever asked to pay. Here's the stacked number. The realistic total cost to legally drive alone, at 18 right now, regularly exceeds $500 to $700 a month once licensing, the car, and insurance are combined. That's not a splurge, that's a second rent payment paid every month for the base level right to move independently, a cost that simply didn't exist at this scale one generation ago. If you want the real math behind what your generation calls normal, not the excuses, not just work harder, just the numbers, that's what this channel does every time, no exceptions. Subscribe if that's the kind of audit you want more of. That's the only ask, and it won't come again until the next one lands. Back to the audit. Level 4. Even if you clear every dollar, the fees, the car, the insurance, the economy underneath driving has quietly changed what a license is even for. A decade ago, not driving meant not moving. That's no longer strictly true, and the shift didn't happen because Gen Z stopped wanting cars. It happened because an entire mobility system got built that doesn't require owning one. Uber launched in 2011, Lyft followed in 2012. Together they gave an entire generation carless mobility for the first time in American history. Tap a phone, get picked up, no license, no insurance premium, no $500 down payment required. For a 16-year-old watching the costs stack up on levels 1 through 3, that alternative isn't laziness. It's a rational substitute that simply didn't exist for their parents. But there's a trap named directly inside the gig economy that rideshare built. DoorDash and Uber Eats often require a car just to earn money on the platform, yet the income needed to afford that car requires already having a way to earn. That's not a choice between working and not working, that's a closed loop, and closed loops don't respond to advice about trying harder. Zheng Twenge, the psychologist who spent 2 decades tracking generational shifts at San Diego State, found something the lazy Gen Z crowd conveniently skips. Smartphone adoption crossed 50% around 2012. That's the exact year teen driving rates, dating rates, and part-time employment all bent downward on her graphs, together, at once. Not a coincidence spread over a decade. A hinge point, 3 trend lines, 1 shared cause. Picture the mechanism directly. In 1985, meeting your friends meant driving to the diner parking lot, cruising the strip, showing up somewhere physical. The car was the only interface. In 2026, the same social need gets met through Discord, FaceTime, or a multiplayer lobby. 0 miles traveled, 0 insurance required. The infrastructure for connection changed underneath the infrastructure for transportation. One got expensive, the other got free. Zoom out, and the license is just one data point in a bigger pattern. Median age at first marriage has climbed past 30. First-time home ownership has drifted into the mid-30s. First full-time jobs with real benefits now land years later than they did for Gen X. Every milestone on the adulthood checklist is arriving late because they all run on the same fuel. Income nobody under 25 actually has. There's a second layer under the spreadsheet: memory. Gen Z watched millennials graduate into the 2008 crash. Foreclosures, gutted 401ks, degrees leading nowhere. Then their own adolescence got disrupted by 2020, a global freeze nobody saw coming. 2 data points don't require fear to produce caution. They require pattern recognition. That's not anxiety. That's a system that got burned twice and stopped touching the stove. Let's kill the scared of accidents theory, because it doesn't survive the data. Crash rates per mile have fallen for decades. Cars got safer, not scarier. If fear drove this, licensure would track fatality statistics. It doesn't. It tracks the price of a used sedan and the cost of a policy instead. Fear is just the story people tell when the real answer is, I can't afford it. The picture shifts hard depending on geography. In a dense city with real transit, skipping the license is a lifestyle choice with a backup plan. In a state like Florida, where zoning built everything around the car, it's not a choice at all. It's a forced bet. No license means betting rideshare stays affordable and a parent or sibling stays willing to drive you indefinitely. No fallback. So here's the actual verdict. Stated plainly, Gen Z didn't lose interest in freedom. The price of freedom changed. License fees up, cars up 30-some%, insurance up double digits year over year, and the cultural myth just never got updated to match the new number. Everyone's still grading this generation against a version of the ladder that stopped existing around 2015. Go back to the ladder. The first rung wasn't skipped. It was sawed off before this generation was even tall enough to reach it. Nobody under 18 voted on license fees, car prices, or actuarial insurance tables. The rung was gone by the time they walked up to the ladder, and everyone standing above kept asking why the kid below wouldn't just climb. Remember the number we opened with? 25%. That's not a personality trait. That's not a generation of homebodies. It's a bill that came due at 16 years old. Insurance quote, car payment, license fee, all stacked at once, for a demographic with close to zero income to pay it with. 75% didn't fail a character test. They failed a math test nobody warned them was coming. Final reframe, and it's the one that actually matters. The 18-year-old without a license isn't the one who gave up. They're the one who looked at a 5-figure car loan, a rising insurance quote, and a part-time wage, and did the arithmetic before anyone else in the room bothered to. Calling that laziness isn't just wrong, it's an insult aimed at the wrong end of the spreadsheet. 25%, that's the number. Not a mood, not a character flaw, not a fear of the road. A licensure rate that dropped because the cost of the first rung climbed faster than the wages underneath it. 25% of 18-year-olds hold a license. Sit with that number. That's it.